one of the main aspects is that we have tools. We have methods. And methods become extremely powerful when they are used. Having a method doesn't really do much if it's not used. It's like having a very powerful tool at home and not using it. No? So it doesn't really make that effect. So when we talk about a yidam, when we talk about a practice such as tarachitamani or self-healing and so on, these are methods. In Tibetan, the name that is used is drup tap. Drup means to realize, to become. Tap means method. So when you look at the sadhana, sadhana also literally means a method of realization. So when we look at the practice, it's written druptab in Tibetan, which means a method to realize our potential, to realize love, compassion, wisdom. That's a method for that. So this method must be used. This is important, okay? Then the other aspect is that what we have written in the sadhana is not the method. What we have written in the sadhana and what we recite is the map, is not the path. You know? It's like if you get a very good personal trainer, and then this personal trainer gives to you one nice booklet where it's written step by step which exercise you need to do and how to do these exercises. But where does the training happen? When you receive the booklet or when you do the exercises? You know? So that's one thing. We receive the method, but to do the exercises, you must have the booklet, you must have the instructions, you must have the transmission. Otherwise, you're not able to do the exercises. But the real thing happens mostly when you do the exercises. Okay? So it is like you cannot do something if you have not entered into that path, but once you enter, then the whole path you still need to walk through it. You know? So today we have given you the empowerment of Tarachitamani, which is also a way I have received this empowerment first time from Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk. Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk came to Holland, no? Once?
96.
96, once or twice? Once, I think.
One time.
Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk, he was one of the gurus of Lama Michel Rinpoche, also my guru. I received many empowerments from him. And in our modern times, he was maybe one of the greatest scholars, but also a great tantric master also. Very, very special master, really very special. He passed away maybe 1-2 years after coming here. And really very special master. Also, from my understanding, he passed away with complete, in Tibetan we say rawang, freedom. He chose the moment. Yeah. It was a difficult moment because two of my masters, also two gurus of Rinpoche also, which was Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk and the abbot of Tashilompo Kachen Losam Punso Rinpoche, were Lama Ganche Rinpoche's gurus, then also my gurus. The two of them, in a different context, they found themselves in a very difficult situation. They found themselves in a context in which they were somehow obliged to do something, and doing it would go against their principles, and not doing it would also go against their principles. They were put into very difficult situations. Really, very, very difficult. So one of them, before needing to take position into that, passed away, Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk. And then also the abbot of Tashilompo, Khen Rinpoche also. He was traveling by train, going to a meeting where he needed to take this position, which was completely against everything that he had ever done. And by the conditions of the moment, he was obliged, was forced to take or one position or the other, and both were against everything. So he caught a fever on the way, and before the meeting, he passed away. No? And he was perfectly healthy, actually. No, this master was very special, actually. I received my first philosophical teachings from him, and he was so kind and so humble And one of the things that everybody normally would say, oh, wow, like this, because for these mystical things somehow catches us. Even though for me, what mostly touched me was his wisdom and humbleness and kindness and love. But I remember your sister, no? And I got a special connection with him also at the time, I remember.
Yeah, Rhea Pendles. She is a friend of Nell, mainly
yes.
the friend of Nell.
Yes, I remember that moment, yes.
That point.
So, anyhow, when he was giving teachings, he was like sitting, behind him was the window. He was sitting in his bed. There were all like implements on the bed, like similar like to here. I was sitting in the floor. I was like 13. And he will be giving the teaching in the most, how to say, kind way, because he was the greatest of all scholars of his time there. Like, people would come to request him teachings on philosophy when they were about to give the final exams, and they were like the best of the bests. They would come to him specially for special advices. And whenever there was a gathering, when there were all the big abbots, you know, many of these abbots of big monasteries, they would come with these important lamas, with all the retinue and a big car and all of this. And he would come in a rickshaw with his own bag, with the very old clothes, very, very humble. But everybody would bow down to him whenever he would pass by. So he was really, really important. And he had very special connection with Gamche Rinpoche. Also because Rinpoche was from Tashilhunpo, he was from Tashilhunpo. And for a period of 1 year, more or less, one Kanche Rinpoche had a very good friend called Kechuk Rinpoche. Some of you have met him.
Australia.
And living in Australia, yeah. And Kechuk Rinpoche at the time was young, and he built a small wooden hut in the middle of the corn plantation, where he was doing retreat. So he and Rinpoche together, they would invite Khen Rinpoche to go to the wooden hut to give them initiations. So only the three of them in this wooden hut in the middle of the corn plantation, and they received the most special empowerments and teachings there for 1 year. Many times they did that. And they developed this very strong connection. And for me, I was receiving this first philosophical classes, which was like learning A, B, C. Like, it was the most basic thing, and he was giving to me. And because I didn't know how to speak Tibetan so well, instead of just giving me the class, he would make me repeat everything. So he would say, Kansa Gita, Tseme Mamikpa, Kansa Gidame Gitseni, Kansa Gidame Laina, Yepada Mepani. This was the first thing I learned, which is Kansa Gita Tseme Mamikpa, which means, it's actually quite profound, because the first thing that I learned from him was, this was the beginning of Buddhist philosophy, it says, Kansa Gita, at the time I didn't understand it. Kansa Gita Tseme Mamikpa. In the inherent existent self cannot be grasped by logic reasoning. This is the definition of the lack of inherent existence of the self. Out of the lack of inherent existence of phenomena and self comes what exists and what don't exist. And then comes the definition of existence, definition of non-existence. In existence come impermanent phenomena, impermanent phenomena, definition of each one. So he teach me this by repeating with him. And when we were doing this, and also the basic of dialectics, and when we were doing this, he was sitting with all the implements, and behind him was the window of the room, and you could see in front like the shadow of the implements and so on, and his body shadow was like the shadow of glass, very light, almost transparent, no? And in the text, this is one of the explanations of having reached the higher realizations of Tantra called illusory body, no? And one time I asked him, I said, how your body, I cannot see the shadow, and this and that, and he didn't say yes or no, he just left it like that, no? And that's also one very beautiful moment, just came to my mind. When Rinpoche would go to see him, it was very special because he would go outside of the main Gompa with around 200 monks of his monastery, and they will be all in line holding auspicious symbols, victory banners, katas, flowers to receive Ganche Rinpoche. And he was in the beginning of it, waiting for Rinpoche. But Rinpoche would stop the car a bit before and would come out in the middle of the mud and would do prostrations right away. And he would go running towards Rinpoche and say, no, don't need to do prostration. No? And then they would go together. But it was very special. So these were two masters that had this power that I saw in my life, that they don't need euthanasia, they choose the moment. When the moment comes, they can choose their own moment. I saw this 2 times. Anyhow, I received the empowerment of Tarachitamani from Geshe Eshe, very special master, when he was in India. And then afterwards, I received it also from Ruban Kanche Rinpoche and also from Nyima Tulku Rinpoche. Okay? So it's my pleasure to share with you this practice. For me, it's one of my most personal, important practice, Tarachitamani. And what I request you is you please make the best use of it. Okay? And it's something that we need to experience. It's something that we need to create intimacy, that we need to make our own experience. This is something very important. We have the tools. We have nowadays books with the commentaries. We have the translations. Everything is there if we put some attention into it. Okay? So please, you take this into your hand. I told some of these stories. For one, I like sharing. But on the other side is also to share that these practices, they come into a very intimate relation. It's not something that you learn in the school and it's something technical and one moment we teach because somehow it's good. It's something very profound, very intimate, that it's passed one generation after the other. Okay?